Hello, everyone. This is John Zorn, Executive Director of ArtsReach. Welcome to our webinar today. It's titled, What Do They Think? Audience Experiences During the Pandemic. And to take us through this, we have Hannah Grannemann. She is the Assistant Professor and Director of the Arts Administration Program at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. She is also the guest editor of the blog on ArtsJournal called We the Audience. So we're really lucky to have Hannah with us. Thank you, Hannah.
Thank you, John, for having me. And I want to thank you for having ArtsReach during this time of the pandemic. It's just been a fantastic resource for everybody. So really a great source of information and community. So thank you for that. And I'm really delighted to be here. Before I get started, I do want to acknowledge that the University of North Carolina at Greensboro sits on the traditional lands of the Kiowa and Asara peoples. So a little bit about me at the beginning. So I have an undergrad degree in acting from NYU, and theater is my main area of knowledge. So after graduation and with my acting degree, I moved very quickly over to the business side, and I worked in casting, nonprofit theater, commercial theater in New York City, and then also did fundraising and strategic planning consulting for nonprofit organizations, arts organizations, and produced with my friends in tiny theaters in New York. I then went to graduate school at Yale University, and I have an MFA in theater management from the Yale School of Drama and an MBA from the Yale School of Management. And then I came to North Carolina, where I was the managing director at Playmakers Repertory Company in Chapel Hill, which is a Lort D theater, budget size of about $2 million, and a 500-seat theater and a 250-seat theater. And then I went to the Children's Theater of Charlotte, which is a large children's theater, professional theater, with about a $5 million budget, staff of 35, board of 35, $14 million endowment, big operation there. That was a delight. And then I came here to University of North Carolina, and I just I love my job teaching arts administration to undergraduates. So what I hope to bring you today is a person who does have professional experience, but at this moment, this challenging moment, has a bit of distance. I'm not trying to run an arts organization during this time, so I hope that I can bring you some information with a little bit of perspective. My heart really goes out to our sector. This is an extraordinarily challenging time. And I feel like just this week, we've gotten really indications that organizations are at higher risk closing, and this is just so tough. So my heart really goes out to all of you who are making very difficult decisions and have great responsibility on your shoulders. So I hope to be really pragmatic during this conversation and present you with information from audience research, but that really applies to arts organizations directly. So I'm going to talk about 4 recommendations. So first, I'm going to talk about you should go for digital. Second, you should experiment. Third, embrace niche strategies. And finally, let go of ROI, return on investment. So first, go for digital. Now, a lot of you might be saying, well, duh, you know, what else do we have at this point? Some of you are saying duh because, you know, there's nothing else for the vast majority of this, of arts organizations at this time. Though, of course, a lot are experimenting with outdoor performances and small indoor performances. But I was really struck by a survey that TRG Arts, which is a marketing and fundraising and organizational strategy firm, they did a survey, and their results in September of 74 arts organizations said that half were not embracing a digital strategy at this time. And I thought that was a surprising result. So I thought I'd really talk through why I think a digital strategy is a good idea at this point. So first, let's make the positive case. So if organizations do embrace a digital strategy, they have the opportunity for a whole new additional audience. Okay, so consider the arts organizations that have leaned for a long time into a digital strategy. I'm thinking about the Met Opera, the National Theatre in England, that have been doing, the streaming in movie theaters for a long time. And then museums like the Metropolitan Museum of Art. They have built up a whole audience that just sees their digital content. Okay, it's a whole different audience for the most part than the ones that come through their doors. So I think that organizations have this opportunity to develop a whole distinct audience in the digital realm. LaPlaca Cohen, an audience research firm, and Slover Linnet did a really remarkable, huge study of 124,000 Americans called Culture and Community in Crisis. And what that showed was that of the people that were engaging with digital content, digital arts content online, they were, a third to half of them, 1/3 to 1/2, were watching content of organizations that they had never been to, right? So that's a whole new audience for arts organizations. On the flip side, Wolf Brown, another really interesting consulting firm doing audience research this time, surveying existing arts audiences, so audiences that were attending in person before this all hit, showed that low numbers of those audiences were engaging online. So only 28% of the arts clients were engaging with content from the arts organization that they were attending, and only 58 had watched any online content for arts. So all this means that there's a whole new online audience for arts content. Second, if you engage with making digital content, you're going to come out the other side with a whole new organizational capacity to make a whole different kind of content. It's going to be a whole new aspect to your organization that you can exploit. It might not remain as primary for you as it is now. Maybe it fades a bit more into the background, or maybe it does become this whole second stream for you and your organization. But regardless, if you engage in it now and you invest in it now, you could come out the other side with a whole new aspect to your organization. And you'll be much more confident, right? And resilient on the other side. You'll be more confident in being able to take on any challenge if you don't kind of operate from a place of fear and just kind of hunkering down. Finally, you'll have a great story to tell on the other side, a story about innovation, creativity, adaptation, and resilience. So you're going to need this for fundraising if you're a nonprofit organization. You're going to need this to be able to tell your audience what you've been doing for the past 2 years. And it's going to be 2 years before we are really fully back in business, in person. So just imagine for a moment the grant applications that you're going to need to write and the major gift prospect meetings that you're going to have, where people are going to be asking you, what have you been doing? And you're going to have this great story for how you adapted to the digital environment. So now let's talk about the negative case. What happens if you don't invest in this? So if you don't, you're going to find yourself behind on trying to rebuild your audience. You won't have kept up your relationship with them nearly as much as you could have. And it will be really difficult to get their attention back. It's going to be difficult anyway. So if you haven't had an aggressive digital strategy, you're going to find it even harder. You might find yourself having to offer more discounts to your in-person events, spending more marketing dollars to try and get your audience back. Next, you're going to be drastically behind in growing your audience. Other arts organizations are leaning heavily into digital, and they are getting those numbers that I just described. People are seeing 1,000% growths in their online content, right? And all those new audiences and audiences from around the world. So you'll be behind other arts organizations. Now, we have no idea how many of those digital audiences will show up in person, but you'll certainly get 0% of any audience that you don't even try to get during this time. And you're going to find yourself behind other arts organizations. Finally, you're going to be behind creatively. Arts organizations and artists during this time are making incredible new work. And they're working for other arts organizations. They're making great work for them. And so simply from a competitive standpoint, other arts organizations, even by now, are they're not only figuring out how to make new content, they're polishing and perfecting and figuring out how to do this really well. So if you choose not to do this, you're going to be behind creatively and with your artists and with your audience. Now I get it. Okay, the ticket sales for online, the price you can charge is usually lower. There are logistical difficulties through the roof. There's union rules that we're bumping up against. There's obviously social distancing for creating anything that's in person. I get it. Plus, your brain is fried. You know, you might be paralyzed by fear of making a mistake. I just want to encourage you to push through it. And I hope this gives you some reasons why to do that. Okay. So now what kind of content should you be thinking about making? So I think first, you do want to be on brand for your organization, okay? You don't want to try something totally new, but you do want to experiment, okay? You want to lead with your strengths, but I do want to encourage you to push forward and experiment a bit, and I'm going to come back to that more in a minute. You should make the best quality content that you can, the best artistic content that you can that's within your scope. The best artists, the best programming. That doesn't necessarily mean that you've done it before. This is a time to try something new, right? Or something that your artists have done before. But do try and make the best quality that you can. There is some forgiveness right now with the execution. Okay, so for example, I think audiences and all of us would rather have a great artist doing online content using an iPhone in their living room than something that's kind of more mediocre content but has beautiful production values. Okay, I think you should try to have good production values, the best that you can, but really focusing a lot on making great, interesting content. Okay. And finally, make it an experience. This is a cliche, but it's true. So let's go into a little more detail on that. The National Endowment for the Arts, periodically does a huge public survey about participation in the arts. And one question they always ask is reasons for attendance. Why do people come? And so these are the top 5 choices. Now, people can choose more than one, so these numbers aren't going to add up to 100%. So number 5 is to experience high quality art, and 45% of respondents said this was true. Number 4, to learn or experience something new. This is great. We're all doing new things right now. Number 3, to support a community organization or event, 65%. That's a big number. And right now, that's really good for us. We need people to be connecting with us as an organization. Number 2, to see a specific individual performer or an exhibit, 66%. And by leaps and bounds, the number 1 answer is to socialize with family or friends. So this is the number 1 reason why people come. So they are using the arts to connect with the people that they love. And this is, of course, going to continue during this time. So as you think about content, these are touchstones that you can use as you're creating the experience and the content. These are touchstones that you can go to say, what do we want people to get out of this? And you start with this and you lead with this and then pair that with the creativity of the artists that you're working with. That is just a recipe. That is a recipe for success. And you're really touching into what audiences look for look to arts organizations for and are looking for from all of us at this time. We focus a lot, I think, as staffers at arts organizations on number 5 and number 4 on this list, because I think it's a lot why we got into the business ourselves, why we are motivated to be there. And what's nice to know is that this is also where our audience is. We are in tune with our audience in that way. But also not to forget that the number 1 reason why people attended arts in person, at least, and I think extends into this time as well, and you can see this in other audience research, they're doing it to connect with their family and friends. So thinking about content, how can you touch that motivation? Here's another bit of research that I think would be helpful to you. Caroline Heim, who is an Australian audience researcher, wrote this great book where she used this frame thinking about the audience as performers themselves. And she found 4 ways in which audiences were performers. As critic, as a community, as a consumer, and as a co-creator of the art. So audiences playing these roles, it deepens the experience for them. And audiences want that deeper experiences on some kind of a spectrum, right? Sometimes audiences just want to watch and sit back and watch. Sometimes they really want to participate. And I'm going to get back to that in a minute as well. So as you think about your content, how can you touch these 4 roles, maybe, okay? How can you encourage your audience in what you're offering to play these roles so that you are indeed helping them to have that deeper and more meaningful experience, and again, touching what they want to do. You know, digital theater experiences, you know, we think, well, maybe we can't have those deep experiences that we had in person, and we are indeed all mourning that in-person experience. But I turned to Hamilton, the launch of Hamilton on Disney Plus, and I watched Twitter all that day and saw some really great things. So where people were finding ways to have that engagement with digital theater. So first, people were tweeting. A lot of people, I have Jimmy Fallon here, of course he's a celebrity, but many people were saying the same thing. They were excited for people who were going to experience Hamilton for the first time. They were excited for them to have what they had experienced as exciting. They were so eager to have that shared with new people. One of the things that people talked most about with the film of Hamilton was that Jonathan Groff, who played King George, spit a lot. And so this was of much discussion. And Caroline Heim found this a lot in her research too, that when she interviewed audience members, which was the center of her book, she found that audiences just loved those moments that were unique to even mistakes. They just loved it, really, that feeling of liveness. And the Hamilton film really touched in that. You never really did forget that it was a theater experience. So the king spitting was this great example of that. Playbill.com put the original playbill of Hamilton up so that you could have that experience of flipping through the playbill. And then finally, I love this picture of somebody's family waiting in line, quote unquote, for the bathroom during a viewing of Hamilton. Again, trying to get that broader experience that we enjoyed in person, but trying to bring that home. So I loved that launch of Hamilton. It continues to be a highlight of this pandemic time. So my recommendation number 2 is that you should embrace experimentation. Okay. So experiment with what, you might say. So first, experimenting with content. So I think you should, I'll go through the whole list. You should experiment with content, experiment with the experience, experiment with who your target audience is, and finally, experiment with pricing. So content, I think you should be on brand again. I think you should stick with what you're strong with but branch out and stretch a bit. This is a low risk time relatively to try something new, right? Costs are generally lower. Marketing expenses are lower. We're not investing in all of the expensive marketing right now. And then people are in a mindset to experiment. Both your artists and your makers and your audience are in this place of experimentation. And I want to touch on some research by a consumer behavior expert, Stacy Wood, who is at North Carolina State University and is a friend of mine. And her research back in 2010, which she re-upped this year in light of the pandemic, she really found that when there are times of change, people are actually more open to experimentation and trying new things. And it's a bit counterintuitive to think about. And that's why she called it the comfort food fallacy, that we think that we would seek comfort at those times, but in fact, we are indeed open to experimentation. So just think about all the people that are baking sourdough bread, right? That's one of the cliches of this pandemic time, right? That's new, okay? And our audiences are experimenting with us. All of those huge new online audiences and people that are showing up to arts organizations online where they've never been before and having their first experience with them, they're in a mindset of experimentation. So arts organizations should be there too with their content. Back to that LaPlaca Cohen and Slover Linnet research, one question that they asked of that 124,000 people was, what do you want more in your life right now? So here's another touchstone as you're thinking about content. In addition to the NEA, Caroline Heim that I offered you, here's another one. This list of what do you want in your life right now? What a great question. Number one, getting outdoors, okay? Connecting with people. Fun. I've heard more people describe the arts experience they're having as fun than I ever did kind of in person, right? So here's another way that you could experiment. So just last night with my kids, I did an online Halloween experience that had this stargazing aspect to it. It was cloudy here in Greensboro, so we didn't go outside, but what they were planning on was that people would go outside and look up at the stars. So gosh, wouldn't that be a great, knowing that that's something that people really want right now, how could you incorporate the outdoors into your experiment? Boy, that's a whole new area for us to be thinking about. But you could do that with some confidence that you'll get some interest, right? Based on some of these survey results. So experiment with your content. Okay. Next, experimenting with the experience. I showed you that Caroline Heim really talked about how it's not just what happens on stage, but that audiences want those to play those roles of critic, be connected to community, be a consumer, which is part of how people express themselves. And so those are some tools for you. I want to go back to some really fantastic research from Wolf Brown from many years ago, but where they developed this framework about co-creation and a spectrum of the arts experience, the arts audience engaging in co-creation of the arts. Now, again, on the one side here, you can see spectating, where on the one end of the spectrum, it's just sitting back and watching. Way on the other end is participatory. So right now, people are doing murder mystery online, murder mystery theater online. So that's really participatory. So here's another framework for you to think about how you can experiment. Maybe you've never done this before, but this is a good time to try it. So there's another tool for you. Okay. Next, experiment with your target audience. Okay. Since there aren't geographic limitations as much right now, you can expand who you can reach. So you should leverage digital marketing right now. Tap into all that data that the tech companies have been gathering about us, whether you agree with that or not, or like that or not. It's an advantage for arts organizations, okay? So you can use social media marketing and digital marketing in an effective way to expand your audience. Okay, you should focus less on demographics right now, and you can use that data to focus on buying behavior and expressed preferences of your audience, so that you can get some more guarantee that you'll be targeting the right people. So to think about, you can expand location, right? Now people around the world can engage with your content. So where normally you would put a fence around your digital marketing to say you only want local people, try opening that up and see who you can find. Okay, thinking about adjacent audiences. So for example, right now, I saw some research coming out of England. I couldn't find the source for it, so I didn't cite it. I don't want to cite it exactly, but saying that family programming right now is huge and a real opportunity. So do you have something that you could experiment with expanding out into a family audience? Or my idea of doing something connected to the outdoors, right? Maybe you've never done that before, but you could experiment. If you decide to do a program with you that's a good match, now you could expand to people that have an expressed preference for outdoor activities. Okay, and you should just let your content guide you, right? So if you're experimenting with some content, allow that to inspire you to expand your audience as well. And finally, pricing. Okay, so there's so many options right now of how you can price your content. You can do free with a donation, right? You can do a ticket price. You can do a ticket price with a donation. You could do differentiated prices based on differentiated experiences, for example. Okay, there's lots out there. Okay. And then you can even write, you have one price for the live stream, one price for 48 hours access to the recorded content, right? So you can go wild with it. So I want to encourage you to try lots of different things and see what works. Again, the risk is kind of low, right? Especially if you're doing quite a bit of content, you can just see what works for you and learn and get better as you go. Okay, so I think your pricing should still be on brand for you. I wouldn't, if your pricing is traditionally low, maybe, you don't want to jump up to a super expensive price right now, unless you have a really justifiable reason for doing that. Okay, so even if you're a small organization that you normally have low prices, if you get a celebrity or a really well-known artist to do something for you, you charge the price, right? And then you could try that. So okay, so you can change your pricing. Okay, people have been doing it. A lot of organizations first offered a lot of their content for free. Now they're starting to charge, or they had a really low price and now they're increasing it. A lot of people get really nervous about changing prices, and I think I want you to get more comfortable with that, right? Try and change prices so that you can see what happens. It's a good way to test what your audience will bear, right? But it needs to have a logic to it. It shouldn't be arbitrary. It should have an internal logic for you, right? I'm not forgetting that you have arts organizations that you are trying to keep solvent and keep running. So you do need to think about what works for your organization. You need to break even, you need to make a small profit, or maybe you have a calculated loss. You're going to have some kind of internal logic that you need to stick to. And then it needs to have an external logic. Your audience needs to be able to understand why your pricing is the way that it is, whether that's a reference point of what your pricing was in the before times, or just in line with what the content is. Okay, so it needs to have both an internal and an external logic. People have had success with differentiated pricing. So one of the best examples of this is Geffen Playhouse, which had a huge hit with this production called The Present, which was a magic experience. They had one price for at least in their last performance. Most of the performances were very small and everybody participated, but for their last show, they decided to open it up just for people to watch. So they had one price for people just to watch, $25. Then they said, if you pay $15 more, we'll mail you something. We'll send something to you in the mail, which is how most people, when they had the very intimate experience, they got something in the mail. Okay, and then they had people who they mailed the whole package to, and they got this full in-person magic experience. Okay, so maybe that's something that you want to try. How can you have a differentiated price for a differentiated experience? The classic example of this is the VIP experience, where most of the audience has one price, but there's VIP access for a different price where you get to say, talk to the artists, right? Okay. And I want to encourage you to kindly ignore the haters, right? You're gonna get criticism. Not everybody's gonna love what your pricing is, okay? And you should listen and you should learn, but if you feel like it's working for you and you're happy with the numbers and it's meeting your internal goals, I think you can kind of gently ignore the people that are telling you, gosh, you should be offering this for free, or you should be doing this or doing the other, okay? So that's what I would say about you're just going to need to absorb some criticism. So you want to try and find the sweet spot. So to pull this whole experimentation section together to balance, you want to lead with your strengths. You want to lead with your audience's interests and their needs, your artist's interests, right? You want your artist to be making great content. And then to have this element of fun and surprise and delight. It's a lot of what people are looking for right now. Recommendation number 3, embrace niche strategies, okay? First, embracing niche strategies makes you increasingly effective at audience engagement, which is the name of the game right now. Second, it's going to increase your organizational effectiveness. So here's what I mean by increasing your effectiveness at audience engagement. So it's frustrating to get contradictory feedback, right? Some people say they loved your show, some people say that they hated it. And so I think what you need to do, instead of saying, oh my gosh, half the audience loved it and hated it, start thinking about those as two different audiences, okay? So just like if you served ice cream, you say served all the same ice cream to people, some people would say, you know, I hate chocolate ice cream. And that's just because they like vanilla ice cream, right? There's nothing wrong with them. They didn't, you know, you just didn't give them the right kind of ice cream, right? But they're not wrong. They just have a different preference. So if you can reframe kind of contradictory audience feedback as just saying, well, they, you know, this just wasn't for them. And then you learn, right? Those people that didn't like chocolate, you won't serve them chocolate ice cream next time, okay? You'll serve them vanilla, okay? So different people, different preferences, okay? This will make you better at engaging with them because then you can serve them what they want, okay? So love the audience you have. Don't be the boyfriend meme where you're just always looking forward at other people. You should love the audience that you have, okay? The arts are already a niche experience, okay? This is more content from that NEA study, right? About 54% of Americans engage in-person arts content in any 1 year. Okay, this is just for performing arts here, where 43% do. Look at this, look at some of these numbers. A lot of specific arts genres are getting less, 15% or less of Americans to them. So we're already in a niche business, okay? It's hard, it's already hard to get people to show up, okay? So I just say this to, again, let yourself a little bit off the hook, okay? So then embracing niche strategies gets you better organizational effectiveness because you can think realistically about who you're able to reach. We get so disappointed when we don't reach big audience numbers, but it is better to set pessimistic to maybe realistic expectations and then exceed them if possible, okay, if you can. So especially now when everything is so uncertain and we want to give some assurance to our stakeholders. It's better to say this is what we expected and we exceeded it than disappointing. So then you can also focus your organizational energies on learning and improving, rather than getting distracted by not having as large of an audience or not having the engagement that you want. And then finally, remember, we're experimenting, okay? You're gonna experiment and try new things that will work for you, and you really might land on something. Last recommendation, let go of ROI, let go of return on investment, okay? This doesn't mean that I think you should be irresponsible with your money. Okay. You're going to be spending marketing money. You're going to be spending money on creating content, including paying your artists. Most important for us to keep them in mind at this time, but it will probably be less than normal, or production costs are less now. But you're going to need to be promoting. We're in unprecedented times. So kind of think about March 2020 as like your first new day in this new world. We can't use our old measures of return on investment or sales figures, so we need to find new ones. And you're only going to do this, have any kind of benchmark, after you do things a few times, right? So again, the sooner you get to experimenting and putting digital content out there, the better, so that you can figure out what is working and what you can expect. So to set yourself up for success, way back to the beginning of what I was talking about, where I think you should be focusing on you should be doing digital content now and trying to engage that new audience, finding that new audience. So to think about success for the future, focus on reaching as many people as you can, focus on engaging them as deeply as you can. This is going to set you up for the best success, for keeping those people when you come back, and converting any of those digital audiences into in-person audiences. If you're not going to set up kind of two tracks of in the future having digital content on their own, you certainly do want to try and convert as many of those people to in-person when you come back. So let go of ROI. Okay, so those are my 4 recommendations. Right, goals, new audiences, right? You want to keep them as much as you can. Okay, so thank you so much. I hope this gives you some kind of toeholds and footholds and some new ideas, and I'm very happy to take your questions.
Okay, thanks, Hannah. If you have a question or a comment, just type it into the old question box, send it in, and we will take care of it. Here we go. Question number 1. Which are faring better, large organizations or small organizations?
So I think it's a mixed bag. I think each has their challenges. So large organizations, first of all, they just have they have more financial resources just to weather this storm, right? Large arts organizations have endowments, cash reserves. I don't need to tell all of you what they have. They also have some more ability to pivot to digital and make great content. For example, Center Theater Group is setting up, is just announced that they're creating a whole way to make digital content, not only now for the future, and they can do that because they have. Because they are a very large arts organization and they have the resources to do that. But large arts organizations cost a lot to run. Even during these times, there's still a lot of expense. So that means that they have a lot to just keep doing. So they are burdened by having a higher fixed cost structure, and that's a challenge. Small arts organizations, on the flip side, don't have as much kind of liquid cash necessarily to first get through this time. So they're feeling a great deal of pressure of just surviving, but they can be more nimble. Okay, so I think about Ma Yi Theater Company, and they are making a lot of online content and really are embracing again this new strategy of digital. So they can be more nimble. And I remember hearing, I think it was the Wooster Group at the beginning, when they were, when people were talking about in person and how we'd have to have smaller audiences, they just said, well, no problem, we'll just do more performances. that's something that a small arts organization can say that a large arts organization can't. So I think it's a mixed bag, and there's pluses on both sides.
Okay. Please send in your questions. If you've got a thought or something that's on your mind, send it right over. What do you think about charging versus free for digital content?
So I do encourage you to. I think it is an individual choice, and I think you should think about it carefully. But I don't think that organizations should assume that they need to offer their content for free. There are lots of arts organizations that are charging. There's lots of other non-arts media that are charging for their content, and audiences, they paid for coming to arts experiences before. Online is very different, and I think overall, obviously, the price will be lower, and I think that's in line with what audiences will see as the value for it. But I don't think that you should automatically assume that you need to offer everything online for free. That's what we started with, because we were in kind of such a panic, and I heard someone say that we were trying to out-generous each other. So that we were really trying to show that we recognize the pain that all of us are going through financially and continue to. But I think there's lots of people charging now. People are making different choices. Okay, so I think about some of the large arts organizations. New York City Ballet right now is offering a free season of pre-recorded content. Okay, and so that makes sense for them. It's already recorded. They are an organization with that are large and probably are seen as having large resources. So they think is a good choice for them. Okay, Pacific Northwest Ballet, they're making new content and doing they have all these world premieres that they're doing. They're charging for their content. Do I think that means that you should offer free pre-recorded stuff and then only things that are new? I think it's really individualized, but I don't think that you should assume that you have to offer everything else for free. I also don't think it's realistic. We're trying to, you're trying to keep your arts organization open, and you need to have money coming in. So I do think it's fine to charge. I think you should experiment and see what works for you. Again, I think that idea of differentiated experiences can help you try and find a range. And we do want to stay accessible and be seen as accessible. So think about having low price points and then finding ways to do higher price points in order to get more total revenue, which you need.
Okay, well, here's a follow-up question to that, Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
I recommended to my director not to ask for a $100 donation to attend our first reopening event, because that price was so outside our usual ticket price and what we had done in the past. It went against what we usually do.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about that?
So I think the details and context and your internal how your organization runs and your all your relationships in the arts organization matter a lot. So if you were there advocating and your boss is kind of or you felt out of step in some way, I think that context is really important. I think this is why you have to experiment, right? And experimenting comes with failures, and experimenting comes with successes. So and the failure might be that you charged too little and you could have gotten more. And the failure might be you charged too much and you didn't get as much attendance as you want, okay? So the more you experiment, the more you learn, and the better you'll be able to be in tune, okay? Go back to my niche audiences though, right? You probably didn't sell 0 tickets at $100. So that's the number of people that we're willing to pay 100, right? If you had also offered a $50 price point, $20 price point, you would have attracted, again, other groups. So, you got to experiment with having differentiated prices. You do need to know your audience, but also, again, thinking about them as different audiences too, including differentiated prices.
Obviously, you have to offer different benefits at different price points, I would think.
Exactly right. So, so if you're going to do that, then some kind of differentiated experience. Unless you could frame it as, well, this is the ticket price, and then you can add on a donation, right? And then they're kind of voluntarily saying, I'm giving you more money, but without an expectation of getting anything else. So the details really matter in how you're describing what is in the ticket price or ticket price plus donation, and what benefits somebody is getting. Again, you have to have a logic that your audience understands of why there would be different prices, not only in the same event, but then also across your online events.
Any thoughts on navigating rights concerns for streaming productions?
So I would say that's outside of my area of expertise at this moment, but it is challenging. I'm seeing my colleagues really navigating that very carefully, and that it's a real challenge at this time. And whatever that if you have to pay for rights, and considering that as a cost. Right, I think that goes into how you think about pricing, things, right? If your organization is in a place where you need to be covering your costs and can't take losses, or you even need to be netting some to cover your overhead, then the rights are part of that. And I just don't want us to be kind of apologizing too much to our stakeholders and to ourselves, and even better, kind of educating our donors and our board members and people that are close into us about what it's taking to run organizations right now. And that includes the whole new area of online streaming rights, in this current time.
Okay, here's a crystal ball question. Do you have your crystal ball handy?
I've got it.
Great. Well, you're going to need it. What do you think might happen post-COVID with digital? We are mostly 100% digital now. Do you think 50-50, 60-40, 80-20? What will it look like?
So I think the answer is going to be different organization to organization, and therefore add all those up and look sector-wide afterwards. Many arts organizations are really leaning into digital, and they are saying, we're going to continue this afterwards. This is an opportunity for us to attract a whole new audience and serve them, and we're going to want to continue that on the other side. And others are saying, and we'll see if that comes to pass for them. That might be a wish that doesn't quite get fulfilled. We're just going to have to see. On the other extreme, some people are just waiting it out, right? And I worry about that strategy. I worry about doing that. Again, I think they're going to find themselves really behind. And some organizations might lean into digital now and then drop it when they come back. But I think that the best strategy is that first strategy of figuring out how, on the other side, how can you continue to serve digitally, recognizing full on it is different. It's a different experience than in person, and it's probably also largely a different audience. But I think that's the best. I think that's the best strategy for now. And you all might throw tomatoes at me for thinking so.
Okay. Are there new or creative ways to get to know what our audience is thinking? Is there a method other than surveys or interviews or focus groups?
Let's see. I mean, I think you should really be paying close attention to, I think you should, okay, great. Social media, right? Not new, but think about how you can use your social media platforms to find out more of what your audience is thinking, okay? So I've seen some attempts at this kind of fall flat when an arts organization asks a really kind of general question or even tries an engagement tactic, but they do it in a really general way. So I saw a performing arts center ask this question like, what do you miss about theater? And the answers that they got back, people were like, oh, everything, or I miss it all, right? And that's not very informative. So how can you think about fun and creative ways to ask questions that will give you valuable information that people will want to answer through your social media? So like a better question might be, how, when you came to the theater, what did you like to wear, right? Because people have different preferences. Some people love the idea of dressing up and going to the theater, right? And they really dress up. Some people love, they just want to go casual, right? So you ask a question like that, see what happens, and you can kind of get a sense. Just remember that this is not a good sample, right? It's not a good sample size. So if you want to get an actual, like, really reliable statistics from a probability statistics theory kind of way, you're going to need to do a survey, because remember, just there's huge selection bias in who's going to respond to you, right? But so I think you can, put things out on social media and try and glean something from the answers. Make it engaging and make it specific and make it fun, and see what you can learn.
In the future, when the pandemic is over, do you believe that arts organizations will continue creating both digital and physical content? Or do you think that the digital content creating will be regarded as less important?
So again, I think that this is an organization by organization choice, and people will make different choices. And I think there'll be a range of kind of what's right. And it's going to depend on the financial resources. It's going to depend on the staff, the support that you get from donors and audience and other stakeholders. And it's going to depend on what organizations do in this meantime. What I worry about is organizations that don't lean into digital content right now, finding themselves behind when we come back, and finding themselves kind of outstripped in a lot of ways, competitively with other arts organizations that have really leaned in. And then also just that it'll be hard to get people back. This is going to be a long time. So if you kind of go dark in a lot of ways, that I worry about not being able to come back. So I think this idea of developing a whole other strategy of digital content, both the content itself, like some approximation of what your physical art form looks like, and just its own content. So, Dallas Opera is a prime example of how they have embraced making whole new, really on-brand, interesting content about opera, about the opera industry, about the opera field during this time, that is its own thing, right? And that would absolutely be able to continue going forward. So it's not only, I think people, is it less than? In some ways, yes, right? Because you're not having that full audience experience. But listen, we're also getting access to content that we wouldn't otherwise get. I have a friend who's a huge opera fan, and he was so excited when he wasn't excited when the pandemic hit. He was excited when pandemic hit and the Met Opera started putting their full operas online. He could see operas that he had never seen before. He had access to things that he couldn't have. I've watched a production from the National Theater. I watched a production of the Wooster Group I had never seen. I saw a Pearl Jam concert that I had never seen, right? So we are also getting access. So is that less than? No, I wasn't at the concert in person, but otherwise, how would I have seen it? So I think that it's not quite binary in that way. Our audiences are getting access to things that they wouldn't otherwise have, and I think that is also a huge plus.
Okay. All right. Last question regarding memberships. Should organizations be putting their resources towards renewing renewing members or adding new members?
Wow, that's a tough question to answer broadly. I think it really depends on what your offerings are, what your resources are, and I think also you're going to have to experiment in this way as well. I mean, you definitely want to hang on just as much as you can to the people that you have. So I guess if you don't really have to choose, but I think you should really focus a lot on keeping your people, because it's so much harder to get somebody new now. How can you experiment with getting those new people in, right? So they're engaging with you. So there, you might have to focus. I was saying, expand your digital strategy to think, let go of your geographic concerns in your digital marketing, right? But if you are focusing on getting new people that eventually you want to walk through your doors, and that's the kind of membership you're talking about, then you probably would want to put that focus back on people that actually are in your geographic area and not waste your time. So I do think you need to be asking those efficiency questions if you are targeting new people, so people that have only engaged with you online and now you're trying to sell them, say, a subscription to come in person. Go carefully, right? And I wouldn't, experiment and see what works, and just think about using your resources efficiently.
All right, well, that brings us right up to our hour. And Hannah, this has been a wonderful dive into lots of new ideas. I really appreciate that, and I appreciate all the hard work you've put into it. So a big round of virtual applause to you. I also want to let everyone know that this wraps up the October programming of New Ways Forward. We will continue going forward in November. We'll have our November programming out to you very soon. And one of the things that Hannah mentioned, we need to push through the fear. Well, we have our group of consultants standing by, the Arts Reach Arts Allies, and if you're a member of New Ways Forward, you're welcome to have a free consultation with any one of those 30 members or 30 consultants to help you push through whatever fears that you might have in regards to what we've covered today. So just go to artsreach.com and sign up for your free consultation, and you'll be off and running. Okay, Hannah, we'll see everyone next time. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, John.
All right, bye-bye.